for whatever reason, this platform does not seem to threaten anti-2A people or the anti-gunners near as much as an AR. Hello everyone and welcome back to AmmoMart.com, where you can find real firepower online. While we were doing the series on some Old West rifles, one of our viewers who left a comment asked if we could do a video on the history of the Mini-14. I told him I would, so in keeping with that promise, that will of course be the focus of today's video. I've always been kind of intrigued by the Mini-14 because when I was a kid I would look at the old gun catalogs, Gun Digest, and they always had one set up with some like skeletonized folding stock. And even though ARs were a thing back then, I'm not quite that old, it just looked kind of cool and sinister. And then of course, if you're from my generation, when the A-Team came out with a stainless wood stock version of it, I was hooked. How cool was that for those that can remember? Here we go. History of the Mini-14, and as we go through the video, I'm going to try to give some highs and lows of the platform. The Ruger Mini-14 was developed by L. James Sullivan and Bill Ruger around 1973. The concept that they had in their mind is they wanted to take the tried and true M1 Garand action and then the M1A1 or M14 and sort of shrink it. The reason why they wanted to shrink it is they wanted it to be utilitarian for farmers, ranchers, and those types to have a small, ultra-reliable, reasonably accurate rifle that you could use to dispatch things like this. For that purpose, it worked quite well, especially when they selected the .223 Remington caliber for its main chamber. When the rifle debuted in '73, it was immediately popular. It operates from a piston drive, of course, once again, making it more reliable than maybe direct impingement, and people just seemed to like it. It was smaller barreled than most hunting rifles. It had the conventional sort of old school traditional wooden stock, and it was an instant hit. As time went on, it even started to get into places like corrections officers for work on the guard towers, some police departments, and it quickly became the little rifle that could. It did, however, have some disadvantages. One of these was the original version, and actually this is a sort of not original, of course, it's in stainless, but if you look here, the receiver is the important part when you're looking at Mini-14s. It did not come with any sort of way to easily mount the scope. And you can see all of the contraptions that have been added to this specific rifle are very common with the Ruger Mini-14. You can, because it's been around so long, find accessories for it and sort of do your own kind of modulation. But issue with that is it's very expensive. And to this day, the rifle remains expensive as well. It's one of the reasons why the AR has surpassed it in popularity. So around 1983, Ruger decided that they would sort of improve the Mini-14, and they came out with something called the Ranch rifle. The Ranch rifle had some other modifications, but the main one was it actually had an integrated scope mounting system into the receiver. It came with proprietary bases and rings, and one of the main issues before that was that the brass gets ejected so quickly out of the rifle that it would damage scopes. So Ruger kind of went through and tweaked all of that, and you had what the world knows now as the Ruger Ranch rifle. As time went on, they offered it in 5.56. Eventually, in a rifle platform called the Mini-30, they came out with the 7.62 by 39 chambering, which remains very popular now. You can watch several videos on YouTube or from other sources that talk about why the Ruger Mini-14 is in some ways superior to the AR-15. I don't feel like I need to rehash those topics, but I'll give you just a couple of them that caught my eye. The first one being, for whatever reason, this platform does not seem to threaten anti-2A people or the anti-gunners near as much as an AR. The AR unfairly has been called an assault rifle and seems way more sinister looking, apparently, to people that don't know a whole lot about firearms. The amazing part to that, to me, is that the gun remains, this one meaning, this rifle, remains off of most ban lists because they calculate it as a true hunting rifle instead of one merely designed to kill human beings. Of course, we know this is a complete falsehood. Same caliber. Right now, you have the same type of magazine capacity. So it's all done out of ignorance, but be that as it may, if you're on the fence about one or the other, that is a true positive advantage to the Mini-14. As time went on, the Mini-14 unfairly got a reputation as not being very reliable. This is completely unfair. What actually was happening was people were using aftermarket magazines instead of the proprietary magazines from Ruger, and the rifle didn't function very well. The way this is designed is pretty much a shrunk down version of the M1 Garand. As we said, we know that's reliable. When it's -20, when it's 100, I've actually read accounts of people dragging one of these with carbine classes through the mud and the dirt and functioned long after many other AR-15s broke down and refused to work. I think if you go back in history, you'll find that when it originally was issued to the military, the M16 wasn't reliable either. Well, once again, there's a valid reason for that. That's because when it was issued, everybody knew it was self-cleaning and never had to be cleaned. In fact, originally, the ARs were issued without cleaning kits. So I think examined fairly, both of those platforms are fairly reliable once they're properly maintained and you use the proper magazines. One of the other interesting aspects to the Mini is it's truly that. It's lighter, its overall length is shorter, and its barrel length is shorter than an AR-15, despite the fact it has an increased sight radius in most factory rifles. This one's been doctored, as we said. This rear sight has been removed, obviously, because they had a scope on it prior. But on a factory setup Mini-14, your front sight is actually out here on a band. So even though shorter in barrel, longer sight radius, which should increase its accuracy. A word on its accuracy. Most people were fairly not impressed with its accuracy in any way, shape, or form at any time. Until 2005, Ruger went on a mission to sort of accurize the Mini-14. The tolerances were tightened. Some of the other internals were changed. Barrel design changed. And right now, if you purchase a modern one, they claim that you can achieve 2 minute of angle accuracy, of course, at the 100-yard mark. The barrels from the Ruger were always cold hammer forged. And if you don't buy a very expensive AR-15, once again, the advantage goes to the Ruger. I haven't shot this platform enough to tell you this definitively, but I've had a lot of people tell me that have more experience with the Mini than I do, that it does have a crisper trigger than your average, not terribly expensive AR-15 with the mil-spec trigger. And anybody that knows what I'm talking about with that knows that's probably true because of the gritty nature of mil-spec triggers. There's nothing to write home about with them. Typically, when you buy that lower, you throw a couple of $100 Geisley or Timney, whatever upgraded trigger in it to get something that's not objectionable. So I would totally believe that that's the case. I think if you're interested in the Mini-14, one of the things that you need to be aware of is the specifics of Ruger serialization. The model I have in front of you right now begins with the 180 numerical prefix. It's 180-. That's important when you're out shopping for Mini-14s because the good ones, the accurized ones, the ones that people continually seek after now begin at 580. So if you happen to be in the gun store at the gun show and you're interested in picking one up, be mindful of that. If it doesn't begin with 580 or higher, you're probably on the lower end of accuracy and quality, which doesn't mean that there isn't accuracy or quality. It's just not as good as the later models. I found while manipulating this weapon that it does have some oddities compared to ARs. You have to keep in mind, when they made this, it wasn't for a battle rifle. They didn't necessarily anticipate quick magazine changes and all of that. So your magazine release is this kind of goofy paddle here, and this is your safety, which is obviously reminiscent of M1 Garand and the M1A1. Most people that are used to ARs kind of find the manipulation of the rifle a little bit cumbersome, but once again, it's designed to dispatch varmint, critters, maybe have a recreational, enjoyable shooting experience without worrying about all of the issues that you get into with trying to design a battle rifle. Because of its popularity and how long it's been on the market, the accessories are endless for the Mini. Stainless, synthetic, you can get stainless wood, folding stocks from the factory, those real cool looking ones we talked about before. This is almost a completely built up rifle. And that's the other thing we need to talk about with the Mini. When it's purchased, it's not inexpensive. MSRP on the rifle is right around $1,000. A lot of that has to do with the design of the gun. It's got a very, very long piston rod, and all of the stuff that goes into making it is quite complex. It's one of the reasons why, past a certain childhood point, they were never super popular to me. Kind of expensive. And then when you start talking about all the accessories you're going to throw onto the rifle, I will guarantee you it's a fairly bad investment. The way to pick one of these up is used in good shape, and somebody's already sort of done all of that for you. And this is not an uncommon thing to see with the Mini, especially in stores that sell Minis secondhand. Somebody built it up and still remained unhappy with it for whatever reason. I think a lot of the reasons people remain unhappy with it is it just doesn't look as cool as an AR. Sort of a project they thought they might be kind of fun to get into, and once they did, they're like, I still prefer my AR. Whether you do or you don't, one thing is sure, the Mini's here to stay. The little rifle that could is also the little rifle that won't die. Even though it has more detractors than most other platforms you could name, they still make them, they still sell them, and in my humble, they probably will for a long time to come. I hope you guys have enjoyed this brief little snippet history into the Mini-14. And if you ever get the chance, please shoot one. It's an iconic piece of American history, and I don't think you'll be disappointed. Thanks, and don't be afraid to like and subscribe.